We're going to go ahead and get started. We got a little bit of a late start, but we had a whole bunch of people that were kind of coming in later this morning. And so anyway, I wanted to just start off by saying, you know, majority of the people here are customers, and thank you for your business. You know, some of the folks that have been here have been with us since like the beginning of Cerdant. So just a little overview on what the missions are here today. I'm going to give you a little update on what we're doing as a company and kind of what I see as our objectives for the day and a little overview of that. We have presentations from some of our team on some technology, State of the Union, you know, relative to security. We have a couple of vendors here today, and you know, just it's probably one of those things where every time you go to a conference, you expect that there's going to be some vendor, right? But this is not going to be a hard sell kind of thing. This is really going to be to share with you some technology that you may have some interest in. And it's a big deal to us because we haven't, this past year was the first time we've added anything besides Sonic Walls in the 15 years we've been in business. So, well, last year I had a slide similar to this and I said we turned 15. So here we are 16 and it's all good. We hired our 50th employee. Now, some of you have more employees than that. To me, 50 is a lot of people. And it's also that point where a whole bunch of federal guidelines kick in, and you all know the story there. But anyway, you know, we started out, you know, 15, 16 years ago, and just to kind of give you a little background on that, I never really imagined that 15 or 16 years later we would kind of be doing the same thing. You know, if you look at security, it's another technology, and you would have expected it to have changed quite a bit over that period of time. But frankly, it's kind of the same business model that it was 15 years ago. And really the reason for it is the threats. I would like to say things have gotten better, but they haven't. You know, all that technology we throw at stuff out there, the bad guys are still out there, and they're still not only as good, but they're even better than they used to be. So I kind of feel like we're running like a funeral home. You know, there's always going to be dead bodies there at the end of the day. You know, so I'm pretty sure we'll still be in business 5 years from now. This will still look a lot like it did because this stuff doesn't change. Some of you know Josh Skeens. He's our director of engineering. He's going to talk to you a little bit about some enhancements we have later on today. We keep adding to our threat detection platform, and that's going to be some things we discuss. This year we added a new product, and some representatives are here from Aerohive. Some of you may be familiar with them. This is kind of unique to us. I mean, as I said earlier, we started out selecting SonicWall as a firewall vendor, and we built an entire practice around one vendor. And for 15 years, we didn't sell anything else but SonicWall products. I mean, we sold the little things, some email security and things like that, but even Proofpoint, which is what we've been selling, it wasn't a big piece of our business. Us adding another piece of technology, can you hear me now? So us adding another piece of technology is a big deal for us. There's all kinds of hardware out there. You may ask, why would we pick up a wireless line? Well, wireless is one of those things, it's a little more like a black art instead of an exact science. You know, Ethernet's easy. You got a wire, and nothing stands in the way from point A to point B. Nothing affects the performance typically. Wireless, it's a little more difficult. There's also a bunch of security aspects to it. So we always, as a business, try to choose to support things, and we're a service organization. We're not a hardware reseller. Hardware resale happens to be part of what we do. But for all of you that are part of our family, you look at us as a service provider, you know, and our job is to be the expert at whatever it is that we do, and you rely on us to do that. Wireless is hot, and it's been hot for a while. It's getting hotter. You know, it seems like it won't be long before hardly anybody plugs something into a wall. It'll all be done wirelessly. And you may have seen the acceleration of different kinds of technologies to increase speeds, increase connectivity, increase security. That industry moves about as fast as anything out there, and we think it's a really good fit for what we do. So a little bit later on, you're going to have a little short presentation from some folks at Aerohive. So anyway, well, Last year, about this time, I put a bunch of slides up and we talked about what happened the previous 12 months and all the bad things that happened, the Yahoo breach, all the millions of records, the release of the DNC emails by WikiLeaks. That was kind of an interesting event, don't you think? Ransomware hit last year really big. I can't tell you how many millions of people got hit by ransomware, but it's still around and they're still doing that. Well, so now let's talk about the past 12 months. More ransomware, Petya, WannaCry, et cetera, the Equifax breach, retail. I was looking at a summary of all the organizations that suffered a breach last year of some sort. It seems like multi-unit retail and restaurants made up like 2/3 of it. Like everybody wants to steal your credit card in case you didn't already know. And it doesn't seem to change, and we live in a world where we talk about security all the time, and it still keeps on going. The last one on there I found really interesting. The Spectre and Meltdown vulnerabilities that were found in Intel chips this last year. Is there anyone in this room that knows exactly what that vulnerability is and how it works? Yes. A guy from Sonic, Dimitri, This is probably one of the most interesting vulnerabilities I've ever seen, in that almost all the others, people can kind of figure out how they work and how you break into them. This is a very complex vulnerability. And I think it's the reason why, this hit the news probably in January. Has anyone heard of any attacks or any exploits or anything where anybody has lost data as a result of these two? Dimitri, you know anybody that's lost anything? Not yet. Exactly. This is, they were screaming like the sky is falling. This is like the worst vulnerability ever to hit mankind. And today, it's been a big nothing for the most part. But I think the reason for that is that's a very difficult vulnerability to exploit out there. And I'm not going to spend time, it took me like hours of reading to figure out how this thing worked, and I'm not sure it's valuable to anybody else. So it was a big story about nothing so far. Maybe somebody will do with it. So I said that a minute ago. What's changed since last year, or the year before, or the year before, or the year before? Nothing. In this industry, I don't care what it is you do, some bad guy is going to figure out some way to inflict some kind of pain on others. It's just a continuing story. Here's the other part. Everything has changed. I have a goal here. What you're going to listen to from just about everybody here in this room today is going to be information. They're going to be talking to you about, here are the bad things that are happening, here are the things you could do, here's the technology available to you. My job is the hardest one in the room. My job today is to convince you to change behavior in some way. Because all this technology out here is changing all the time, but for the most part, most of our customers are not changing much. They're doing kind of the same things they did 5 years ago. I had this talk about last year. I'd like to say that I made an impact on everybody. I don't think that I did. I bet you there's 1,000 guys before me have put a graphic up here on the screen that says, what is the biggest threat to your network? Because you probably couldn't get 20 people in a room to agree on what that actually is. But having been in this business a long time, I think I know. People ask me all the time, who's our competition? I get that question a lot. Now, in the world in which we operate, we generally don't have competition for what we do. We don't go out there and compete against Fortinet or Palo Alto or all those other players out there. Our competition really in offering the services that we do and the things that we provide to our customers, our competition is everybody out there that's just been doing the same thing forever, okay? And getting people to change behavior is one of the more difficult tasks everybody in the security industry has to do. Has anyone in the room here been to the RSA conference out in California? Okay, that was like 2 hands went up. Does anybody know what it is? Okay, a few. RSA is the largest security technology conference on the planet. They do it every year out in California. And I went there. It was a couple weeks ago. And as I'm walking around there, I'm absolutely blown away by how much technology there is out there. There were 500 exhibitors at RSA, 500. How does anybody choose about all that? You know, I mean, if you're average IT people, you've got so many choices that you have to look at and try and figure out what you're going to do. I don't know how anybody goes away from that. All that technology that I saw out there all fell into one of two big giant silos, as I call them. You have all these vendors over here whose job it is to keep bad things from happening, whether they were endpoint security, whether they were identity management, whether they were firewalls, whatever it was, their job is to keep bad stuff from happening. Then you had another 200 or 300 over here whose job it is, well, they assume bad stuff is going to happen no matter what you do with those other guys. And their job is to figure out that it's happened and let you know that it did and give you some kind of path to remediating the problem. There were 500 of them. So part of the challenge is figuring out for all of you what you're going to do, what steps you're going to take. So our hope is here today we can share with you a couple of things that will help you down that road a little bit. How many companies here in the room have a CISO, a CISO, Chief Information Security Officer? We got, okay, so I have a question for you. How many employees do you have? Total employees? 10,000? So, exactly. The only companies that have somebody whose only job it is to oversee the security of their data assets are big companies. They're enterprise companies. Most of the people here in this room are part of an organization that has less than 1,000 employees. Anybody in here have and you don't count now because I know you the answer is going to be yes, have just one employee whose job it is to administer security technology? Anybody have a dedicated security guy? How many you got? How many people on your team are just security? How many employees do you have? Okay, so that's kind of an unusual event. Most of the time you don't see even that in companies that have less than 500 to 1,000 employees. So who gets to do all this stuff then? Who gets to decide what technology you're going to use or how you're going to behave as a company when it comes to security? You? All of you? All the people here in the room? Is it your job then? Do you have anything else to do? Probably not, right? Therein lies the rub sometimes for us. So as a company, we targeted small to medium-sized businesses. And if you look at the profile of our customers, they're typically 50 to 500 employees. I mean, if we have some with thousands and we have some with 20. But by and large, the sweet spot for all of our customers is really around 50 to 500 employees. And in that universe, almost all of them have an IT person, somebody who is responsible for servers, desktops, whatever software they're going to choose. They might have 3 or 4 people. You know, they might have a small team that administers all that. But in general, people in the organization are responsible for all kinds of things. And there are all kinds of things that typically have an urgent need. Like, my printer stopped working, or I can't get out to the internet, or something else that seems way more important than security at that moment in time. And so security has a tendency to drift to the back of the room in terms of importance here. The downside to that is that that's just the kind of scenario where bad things happen. One of the things I've noticed over time is that since all of you have so many things you have to do, and your day is taken up by things that are not related to security, you probably spend more time educating yourself about technology that's going to enable your business, not technology that's going to protect you from some unknown bad thing. So the day ends up being a lot about making your company work, making technology work, producing results and things like that. And it's surprising to me that how little time people actually spend being aware of what's going on in the security space. There is Josh is going to do a presentation a little bit later, and he's going to talk about a report that comes out every year from Verizon. So Verizon does this thing that identifies, really, it summarizes all the bad stuff that's happened over the last year, but it puts it in statistical terms, like how many various types of attacks occurred, what the losses were to various industries and things like that. There's an interesting segment in there. So some of the people in this room are bound by various regulatory requirements and things like that. And one of them that is close to our heart, because we have a lot of retail customers, is PCI. There's a really interesting statement in there, and the statement was, because they interviewed thousands of companies to see what their losses were, to see what happened to them. Those companies who were PCI compliant, 100%, they didn't find any breaches. And I'm going, that is stunning, you know? That's an amazing statistic. But as you think about it, because we have customers like that, some of our customers are totally dedicated to security and are really conscious of it, and they think about it every day. They represent maybe 5% of our customers. We don't have many of them like that. But the ones that do, nothing bad ever happens to them. And I was trying to think about why that is. The thing about PCI is, because if you're compliant with PCI, which is really a mandate for anybody that takes credit cards, if you really are that far along that you're complying with all the rules of PCI, then what you've already done is change the way you think about security in the first place. It has risen further up the food chain in that list of things you have to do every day. So my hope today is that I will inspire you to spend an extra 15 minutes out of your week and think about security just a little more. So I tried to come and think up a couple of ways in which some technologies that have come out over the last couple of years that I think are truly amazing. And there are a couple of them, and some of them don't really take that much for you to do. This one item here is just exploding, and most of my customers never notice, okay? When I did this conference a year ago, a lot of discussion was around encrypted traffic. So you go to almost any popular site today. I don't care whether it's Yahoo or CNN, or it doesn't matter. Go to virtually any site today, and the traffic's encrypted. Why do people encrypt traffic that's just content? The answer is pretty simple. They want to get past all those people like you who have firewalls out there that get to decide what your employees get to look at, except right up into that point where they encrypt it, because now they can't tell what you're looking at. And so there's a reason why Netflix encrypts streaming movies. You would say, what do you need to encrypt a movie for? It's to get past all the content management capabilities that exist out there in the business world, frankly. So you'd be hard-pressed to go to any site that lands in the top 50 sites in the US that is not encrypted today. And why is that a problem for you? Because you're going, hey, it's Yahoo, why do I care? The problem of it is that every one of those sites uses ad servers to dish up content. So when you go to MSN.com, you're not really just going to MSN.com, you're going to DoubleClick, you're going to all these ad servers out there that are going to dish content up to you. And all those people that are going to be dishing their content up to you, their traffic's encrypted too. And embedded in some of that stuff is malware. And so the things that you've used for a long time, such as firewalls with deep packet inspection, which that technology's been around for over 10 years and it's really good, it was really good right up until that point where it couldn't tell what the traffic was. So we have a gentleman here from SonicWall today, Dmitry Stanovman. I'll just do a quick intro. Actually, I don't know exactly what your title is. Dmitry is with SonicWall. You're like a product manager with...
I run product management for medical security, executive director of product management.
He's going to talk about this in a little bit, and the numbers are very interesting. But this is really one of the biggest threats to the network that we see taking place today. And almost everyone in this room has the ability to solve this puzzle, because you have a SonicWall firewall, and there's a feature on there that you can deploy. Some of you have done that, called DPI SSL. Statistically, the world is not doing that. So if you look at I think one of Dimitri's slides might be about the Gartner story on how many people they think will be deploying DPI SSL capabilities by the year 2020. And it's a horrible number. It's like 20% of businesses. And I'm going, but people, don't you know, if I'm a bad guy, what am I going to do? I'm going to find the easiest way I can get into somebody's network, and one of the front doors is I'm just going to be part of that traffic that gets dished up at Yahoo. So you can go to, I've seen it myself several times. You go to a site and all of a sudden you get redirected to some place that says, do you want to update your Firefox or your Flash or whatever it is, and it looks just like Firefox or Flash. And if you were the person who actually clicked on that, you will, in most cases, it won't be malware there. It'll start a downloader. But you won't know any of that stuff just happened. But because that was all encrypted, the stuff that you depend on, your perimeter security to stop that kind of stuff, it can't see it. So, for the end of the day, we're hoping at least one person in this room says, you know, I am going to deploy DPI SSL because I have it. I know it's a little bit of work on my part, but we can make it really easy for you. So here's the other thing. I'm going to guess that most of the people in the room here are using one of the usual suspects. Symantec, Trend, McAfee, Sophos. I can go down the list of all the names out there that provide antivirus solutions out there. We have, up until this last year, we never sold an antivirus solution, and there's a couple of reasons why. First of all, they've only been moderately effective ever anyway, but they created a lot of overhead, problems with desktops, endpoints. They had a lot of bloat to them. What's really happened in the industry, it's just like the industry's really dirty little secret is, none of that stuff works anymore. For the most part, it gives you a false sense of security. Signature-based solutions for endpoint control simply don't work anymore. Yeah, are they 60% effective? Okay, that's their claim. And that's about the most they'll tell you, too. The reason they don't work anymore is because the bad guy's ability to create unique malware that is undetectable by the signature, and their ability to launch a zero-day attack on somebody is so great that the AV signatures just can't keep up. You can't. There's no way. And if somebody wants to attack you specifically, I guarantee you, if I wanted, anyone in this room, if I wanted to get in your network and do harm to your systems, I could do it. And I'm not that techie. So, we're going to talk about what's changed in that. So the next thing is some folks here are going to talk to you about artificial intelligence on the endpoint. There's products out there that some of you are aware of, such as Cylance. SonicWall is now partnering with SentinelOne. This is the new generation of endpoint security, and it works. So we picked up Cylance about a year ago. It's an incredible product. It works completely different. There's somebody from Cylance here who's going to talk about that. But let me tell you, if you're still using Symantec and McAfee and all those other solutions, your network is not safe. So part of this whole process is trying to get people to change from what they've always been doing, you know. And so everybody has a firewall, everybody has a spam filter or email security, everybody has some kind of antivirus. I mean, those are the things that almost everybody does, and they use that to keep their network safe, except all that is continually changing. And sometimes that requires that people in this room who are the IT recommenders or IT decision makers, it gets really hard to stay up with that stuff. Virtually every change that you would have to make, if I sell you another solution that's not the one you're using right now, I recognize that you're going to have to spend some money and you're going to have to do some work, because I just can't wave a magic wand. Some of those are going to require a change in behavior. You know, it might require a change in behavior for your end users. If you implement the sandbox feature on SonicWall, for example, well, they're used to clicking on a download and have it instantly pop up and off to the races. Well, if you use a sandbox feature, which is, you'll hear about that a bit later, a very effective means of fighting malware, but it has to look at download you just did for a few seconds before it says, okay, I think this is all right. You can now finish this download and you can work with it however you want to. Then there's that last hurdle, getting management to agree with what you want to do. Somebody has to write a check at the end of the day, okay? And it may not be you. If you're an IT professional who is a recommender, let me just say this, if something goes wrong, who's going to be responsible? Probably you, right? So here's the challenge for most people I know in IT is figuring out how to manage upward and get the dollars or get the support that they need for security. Because, you know, most of the guys I know that either they're like me that run a business, you know, they have a small business, or even guys that run a bigger business that maybe has 400 or 500 employees. They don't get up in the morning thinking about, gee, I wonder if my network is safe. They get up in the morning thinking about, wow, I wonder if we're going to make any profit this month. You know, their world looks totally different than yours. And so what you're trying to do is get some face time, not only get some face time, but to convince them that that thing he was thinking about in the morning when he got up, which was, am I going to be profitable this month, might be endangered if he doesn't change some behavior of the company. So one of the things I wanted to share with you a little bit, how to sell change to management. Well, the first thing you're going to have to do, does anyone here remember a guy by the name of Zig Ziglar? He was like a famous salesman from the 80s, okay? Some of you are old enough, some of you aren't, but he was famous. And one of the things that he used to sell pots and pans. He said the first thing you have to do is you have to believe in what you're selling. He said, when I started selling pots and pans, I bought the whole set. To all of you, it's the same thing. You cannot carry the message to management, and you can't get those dollars. A lot of you don't even have a budget, you know. You're operating on whatever the boss says, hey, I need some money. He goes, yes or no. Is that right? So trying to get those dollars is sometimes difficult, but in order to make the case for it, you're going to have to believe in that technology yourself. We're going to spend some time in this room today, and I'm going to sell you on some of that technology, or someone else is, I'm not, but then you have to take that message back to management. One of the best ways to do that is to identify what the risks are. And probably a lot of you have not taken the steps of actually saying, what is it that I'm protecting here? And where is it? And how much of it is there? And what happens if part of it fails, you know? Take an inventory. Understand what your network looks like, because once again, you're going to have to present this to management and say, hey, this is what our risks are. This is our threat landscape. This is what could happen. Here's some solutions I'd like to suggest. But you're going to have to make the boss a little bit sick before you can make him well. So you have to identify where the threats exist. Identify the costs. Understand management needs. I think I just did both of those. Identifying the costs is a little hard to do. I mean, you can identify the costs of what it takes to implement some technology. What's really hard to do is identify the costs of not implementing the technology. You know, and ROI and security has been that battle that we've all fought forever. Like if you spend, the more money you spend, the less results you get, in theory, because nothing bad's going to happen, right? And the less money you get, the more other stuff that happens. So that's always been a challenge, but if it were me and I was trying to talk to the boss and I wanted to get some dollars for technology, particularly on the security side, I almost have to say, what's at stake if you don't do this? Now, you may have never had a breach of consequence ever. And I was, you know, before I did this presentation, I went out to Google and just started looking for every site that would tell me how many small businesses go out of business after a breach. There was a report about a year ago that percolated through like Fortune and Inc. and all the magazines out there that said about 60% of small businesses who suffered a data breach went out of business within a year. That seemed like a really high number to me, you know, and you know, we do live in an industry where our mission is to scare the crap out of everybody because we think if we make you scared enough that you'll buy some more stuff from us. That's really how the whole industry does work to a certain extent, but there is really bad things that do happen. Now, whether that 60% is an accurate number, I can't say, but I know it's not 5. So let's, for the moment, just say it's some number in between. If it's 30%, those are really bad odds, if you ask me. And if I were the owner of a business and I thought I could spend a few dollars to mitigate some risk that could put me out of business, I just might do that. So, that first part where I said about selling it to yourself, you have to learn about what's out there and what your choices are. You'll have to spend a little bit of time. You can spend time in a room like this where we all talk about it a little bit, but you're going to have to, in your world where you have so many other things that you have to do, if you spent 15 minutes a week learning about security and what your choices and what the technologies are and what they're protecting, you would put yourself so far ahead of your peers, you wouldn't believe it. I put that third one up there because I was thinking to myself, if I was just going to read one online publication in the entire industry, and I wanted to be the one where I could get the most quality information about what's happening in the world of network security, that's probably it. All of us in the security biz, we read all kinds of publications. We're on newsletters. We get this. It's like drinking from a fire hose. But if all you had was 15 minutes, I'd probably go to this and just read the headlines every week, and that'll put a lot of stuff in perspective. And they will talk about things that you will find useful in your business. Some may be things that are tools and technologies that are beyond the scope of your business, but you'll get that pearl about once a month, and that'll be a great source to start. So, getting back to understanding the risks. In my world, I was thinking this because I went through this exercise. We're a security business, so we think about this all the time. So we're not normal in the world of businesses. You guys are the ones that are trying to sell something different than security, and that consumes your day. And so I got to thinking, what if we lost all our data? What if we lost everything? Would we be out of business? Yes. Yes, we would. Almost everyone in this room would be out of business if you lost everything. Now, you might be saying, well, I probably won't lose everything. What are the odds of that? Well, I would suggest to you that talk to a few of those companies that got a really bad case of ransomware, and there were thousands of them. And some of them lost everything. And you might think, well, I spent a few dollars and got it back. Some of them didn't. And oh, and by the way, a lot of those people that thought, hey, I'm covered, I got a backup system, they discover that part where it's not really about backup, it's about restoral. And then when the restoral part doesn't work like it was supposed to, then the panic sets in, the beads of sweat start to form. And in fact, I guarantee you there's some people in this room that tried to restore something in the last year and it didn't. So here's what I would say is, if you could up the odds of not even having to do that, because even if you said, hey, I've got this covered because I have backup, I have all kinds of these resources, it's still money and time. It's still resources that you took up to do that. So perhaps if you could do some things that kept that from happening in the first place, the value of that is anywhere from maybe a few $100s to the survival of your business. Literally, it could be that great of a threat. That's what I would be telling my boss. I'm going, boss, you got these data assets, I got servers over here, we got stuff in the data center, we got these desktops, we've got all these points to the internet, we have remote users. These are all points of vulnerability. And these are all points where we have data. What would happen to the business if you lost all or most of it? What would happen? If that doesn't get their attention, I don't know what else to do, really. Well, I said this before, management doesn't care about security. It's true, but profitability sometimes is tied to that one element of the business that you're trying to do. Be specific about the risks and costs. Don't be afraid to identify current vulnerabilities that you may have out there, or inadequacies. Your boss is expecting you to tell him what he needs to know. If you're responsible for it and you don't take those steps, whose fault do you think it will be if something bad happens? Whose phone's going to ring? So it's in everyone's interest. If you're a recommender or someone who's responsible for security, spend that time in self-management. It just simply is that important. Yeah. What if you do nothing? I think I just said what happens if you do nothing. About time for me to stop here. My biggest job here today, and that's the reason why I started out this session this way, is the biggest challenge I have in this business, and it's been this way since we started, is to getting people to change their behavior. And as our industry changes, like at the speed of light, getting all of you to change and be informed and be aware of what those changes are and recognize that maybe what you were doing 6 months ago or 6 years ago just isn't working anymore. Because I guarantee you, there's a whole big percentage of people sitting in this room that what you're doing isn't working anymore. And the only thing between you and disaster is luck right now. That's what's in between. So anyway, we're going to kick off the rest of our program. Does anybody have any questions for me? I know you're going to let me off easy, aren't you? Okay. Well, to continue on with the show.